we're going to study about cranial cavity today. Let me know how many of you know exactly like definition of a skull. What is a skull? What is a skull? Good morning, everyone. I can see your messages. So, skull is single line definition. It's the skeleton of head. The skeleton of head is called the skull. Now, skull has been divided into two parts. One is called the cranium plus mandible, right? So, cranium plus mandible. Actually, temporomandibular joint is the only movable joint in the skull. So, if you remove the mandible, normally what you study, the bone which you get to study is sometimes is articulated. The mandible is articulated, or sometimes you get the skull which is without a mandible. So the skull without a mandible is called cranium, and cranium plus mandible is equal to skull. The other way of defining is into two parts. That skull is calvaria plus facial skeleton. Now calvaria is the bones which are in close approximation, or you can say the bones which wrap the brain from all the sides. They form the calvaria. So calvaria is actually the brain box which encloses the brain from all the sides. So calvaria is made up of 8 bones, and the rest of the skeleton of skull is called facial skeleton, which is made up of 14 bones. So together skull has 22 bones plus 6 ear ossicles that make 28 bones. Okay, so remember, now you can define skull, you can divide skull into two parts. Either you can say cranium plus mandible is equal to skull, or you can say calvaria plus facial skeleton is equal to skull. Okay, okay. So the outside of the skull that has been taught to you, I believe, many times in the lectures as well as in the tutorial class and the post-lunch lectures. The outside of the skull is studied in different normas: norma verticalis, norma frontalis, norma lateralis, norma occipitalis, norma basalis, right? The external features of the skull, they have been taught to you separately. Mandible also has been taught to you. Now here I'm going to teach you about what you find within the calvaria or within the cranium. The better word used will be calvaria, because when you cut open the vault, what you find inside is actually the inner surface of calvaria. Then within the cavity, there is, the lining of this cranial cavity is lined by dura mater, and dura mater has different folds. We'll study about those folds, and the dural venous is formed therein by between the two layers of the dura. Okay, this you are saying is the inside of the cranial vault. Cranial vault is the top convex flat, convex dome-like portion of the cranium, which is called the cranial vault. After being cut open, you are seeing the inside of the cranial vault, right? So in the cranial vault, you see the color coding is for different bones. This orange color bone is the frontal bone, and it is an unpaired bone. Posteriorly, you have this unpaired bone. This is the occipital bone. Then on the two side, this is the paired bone, the parietal bone. So the two parietal are fused together, rather joined together with the help of this sagittal suture. This frontal bone articulates with parietal bone to form this frontoparietal suture, also called coronal suture. There you find the occipitoparietal suture. This suture is also called lambdoid suture. Types of sutures have already been taught to you in general anatomy. The different types. This one is called the serrate suture. Okay? This is an example of serrate suture. Lambdoid suture, if you go down below, you'll find denticulate processes invaginating in between, adjacent two bones, finger-like digitations between two bones, and that's called tooth-like processes. So it's called dentate suture. Okay. Here also you find is somewhat sagittal type of serrate type of suture, coronal suture. Apart from this, what you find that on the inner table, it is made up of two tables in an adult. There is an outer and an inner table with a marrow in between, and that's called diploi. Okay. Then here you find there are impressions of vessels. These are the meningeal vessels. Take. But remember, there will be meningeal artery as well as meningeal veins. They are actually running in the epidural space. Epidural space means outside the endocranium and below the inner table of the cranial vault. So they give this impression on the inner table. These are streaks formed because of the impression of the meningeal vessels. Mainly the middle meningeal artery, because middle meningeal artery supplies the dura of the cranial vault. You can see these branches are arising from this point somewhere. The point here, this area is called temple. You've been taught about this. The edge-shaped suture formed here is called pterion. Okay? So this, pterion, below to pterion, you find is the anterior division of middle meningeal artery. And these are the branches of the middle meningeal artery which supply the dura of the cranial vault. Apart from this meningeal artery, you also have the meningeal veins. But the impressions, if they ask between meningeal vessels, it's yes, Akash, you've already written what I wanted to ask. That it's the impressions of meningeal veins, not the artery. Basically, artery do have an impression, but because the veins are more in approximation, more closely applied to the inner table of the cranial wall, so the impressions here are mainly because of meningeal veins. Okay. Then on the parasagittal suture, adjacent to the sagittal suture, you find such lacunae or small fovea. You can see they've written as granular fovea, because on this portion, it's the dura mater which folds on itself there are two layers, endosteal and meningeal. The meningeal layer of dura folds on itself to form falx cerebri below to this sagittal suture. Continuation of sagittal suture in the early development stages in the fetal life, frontal is also paired, and there was this suture called diploic suture, metopic suture. So the sagittal suture, superior sagittal sinus, or you can say the attachment of the falx cerebri, extends under this metopic suture up till crista galli, reaching through the frontal crest. So the two margins of these, just parallel to the sagittal suture, you can see two margins. This is called sagittal sinus. The depression there on the undersurface of sagittal suture is sagittal sinus, and on the two margins you find is attachment, or you can say the two layers of the meninges, endosteal layer and meningeal layer, they merge. So the sinus formed here is superior sagittal sinus, and into the sinus, there are, you know, pedunculated tufts of arachnoid processes called arachnoid granulations in elderly, otherwise it's arachnoid villi also. So because of those pedunculated tufts are called arachnoid granulations, you can find there are fovea. These are called granular fovea. The impressions of arachnoid granulations can also be seen on the inner table, on the inside. These are called granular fovea. Okay. Yes, that's for CSF absorption or drainage of CSF from subarachnoid space into the dural venous sinuses. Then regarding obliteration of these sutures, and the obliteration of suture is called synostosis. If this is called synostosis, then what is synchondrosis? Who will tell me what is synchondrosis? Synchondrosis is the fusion of primary cartilaginous joints. Remember, between epiphysis and metaphysis, there was a plate hyaline cartilage, which is called a primary cartilaginous joint at the two ends of the long bone, and that was meant for the purpose of growth of the long bone in the longitudinal axis. By the time of skeletal maturity, this physis of the growth plate disappears and the two ends fuse. Epiphysis fuses with metaphysis, and that is called synchondrosis. So obliteration of primary cartilaginous joints is synchondrosis, remember. And natural, or you know ankylosis is like when, abnormal fusion of the two bones, the bones which were not meant to fuse but have been either hydrogenically, surgically, they have been fused in a different, in a fixed position, or by natural process, just like you are seeing in this diagram. So fusion of the bones is called synostosis. Syndesmosis क्या होता है? What is syndesmosis? Syndesmosis is another type of fibrous joints where the two bones are held together with the help of a ligament. A ligament binding two bones together without any articular surfaces, without any capsule surrounding the joint. That's called syndesmosis. So these are similar words. So I was just helping you remind those words: synchondrosis, synostosis, syndesmosis. Now about obliteration of these sutures, you know that the cranial wall, these flat bones, they have sutures. They are fibrous type of joints. In early child, in a neonate, you can say, in a newborn, these sutures are not obliterated, and the reason is they facilitate parturition by slightly overlapping. But the periosteum on outside and inside at these sutures are connected with the help of intersutural ligaments. See, because of intersutural ligaments, the bones, which is a lax ligament, then after birth, the bones are brought back into position, and gradually there was the gaps in this cranial vault. There are 6 big gaps one in the anterior median plane called anterior fontanelle, one at the posterior end of the sagittal suture is the posterior fontanelle, then at the terion, the sphenoidal fontanelle, and at the asterion posteriorly on the two sides above the mastoid, that's called mastoid fontanelle, they fuse. Now, earliest to fuse is the posterior fontanelle, 2 to 3 months of life, and the sphenoidal fontanelle, anterolateral fontanelles, they also fuse around 2 to 3 months of life. Then posterolateral fontanelle fuses around 1 year of life, and the anterior fontanelle, which is the biggest fontanelle, a gap between the flat bones, and that fuses around 18 months of life. Then after that, this skull keeps growing, in all direction, anteroposteriorly, transversely, vertically, it keeps growing. And until age of around 21 to 25 years, there is like full attainment of the size of skull. And then after that, when the skull has attained its full size, there begins this synostosis process, means obliteration of sutures. Sutures are, this cranial vault, the flat bones, they're made of two tables, outer and inner table. So this obliteration of suture, this process starts, synostosis starts. It's a question now. It starts first on the inner table or on the outer table first? Anybody? I believe you have these bones with you. If you're not having, like, you can go into the atlases, books, keep reading, keep seeing the diagrams. So obliteration of these sutures first start on the inner table. Yes, Kirti. Obliteration of sutures first start on the inner table, yani ki inside of the cranial vault, and that happens in the third decade of life. Then later on in the fourth decade of life, there is obliteration, this process of obliteration, synostosis, that starts in the outer table, like from the outside of the skull. So if you find a skull which has most of the sutures which are already been obliterated, you can presume that it is more than 40 plus the age of the skull. The more the obliteration, the older the skull. Okay, so you've seen that this sagittal suture, which is nearly obliterated in this diagram, that's called synostosis. Now here you're seeing is the cranial cavity. More commonly used word is cranial cavity, or the better word is calvaria. So here you are seeing is the inner surface of the floor of cranial cavity. As I told you, the more common word used is cranial cavity. So I'm using the same word. So we are seeing is the floor of the cranial cavity. Now, floor of the cranial cavity is divided by these bony processes into three fossa. You have this anterior cranial fossa. This is the middle cranial fossa. The butterfly shape, it is the middle cranial fossa, and this one is the posterior cranial fossa. The limit of the differentiation or the limitation between anterior and middle cranial fossa is by these lesser wing of sphenoids. Similarly, middle and posterior cranial fossa are separated by this upper margin, superior margin of the petrous temporal bone. Thick. So then in between here you find is the body of sphenoid, which has a depression superior surface space, and that's called sella turcica or hypophyseal fossa. Got it? So there, this is the frontal bone. You can see this is forming the roof of the orbit or the floor of the anterior cranial fossa. This is the sphenoid, the body of sphenoid. These two processes are the anterior clinoid processes, and you have these, this point and this point is the medial clinoid process. In between anterior and medial clinoid process, directed laterally, is the opening called optic canal. Okay, here you find is a depression for optic chiasma, that is called sulcus chiasmaticus, and this bony margin is called tuberculum cellae. To this, the diaphragm covering this sella turcica is attached. Similarly, this posterior end, this is a sloping bone, this occipital bone, and this is the sphenoid, the body of sphenoid, and this is the body of sphenoid. They both fuse at spheno-occipital joint, which is a primary cartilaginous joint meant for the anteroposterior increase in diameter of the skull. So after fusion, this piece of bone is called basi-occiput. When you see from outside, it's a broad bar of bone with a pharyngeal tubercle in the middle, remember? So, and inside there's a sloping surface anterior to the foramen magnum. This sloping surface is called clivus. And to the upper margin of this clivus is called dorsum cellae. Dorsum cellae, again, the posterior end of the diaphragma cellae is attached here. And the two lateral points are called posterior clinoid processes. Got it? Now, adjacent to on the two sides of this diaphragm, on two sides of the sella turcica, you find this groove, and that's a groove for internal carotid artery. Internal carotid artery enters the cranium through carotid canal, and after having this petrous course within the petrous temporal bone, it emerges into the cranial cavity through foramen lacerum. This is foramen lacerum, which is a false foramen, right, between the apex of petrous temporal and sphenoid. This gap here, this is foramen lacerum because it has a rough, crooked borders, so it's called lacerum. Lacerated margins hote hain. And through this internal carotid artery enters and grooves this surface. And this surface, at this surface, the dura has a biggest sinus here on the two sides. The biggest dilatation of the dural venous sinuses is this on the two sides of the sella turcica, and that's called cavernous sinus. So internal carotid will be one of the contents passing through the carotid, passing through the cavernous sinus. Okay. Then you see that this and this both are, forming the floor of the middle cranial fossa. In the middle cranial fossa, anterolateral to lacerum, foramen lacerum, you find is this foramen which is oval in shape called foramen ovale, right? Foramen ovale, say, it's V3, mandibular division of trigeminal that passes, accessory meningeal artery enters, then lesser petrosal nerve, remember, you've been taught about otic ganglion, the preganglionic secretomotor fibers to the parotid gland pass through this, through the lesser petrosal nerve and emissary veins. So MALE, right? So this is through foramen ovale. Just postulatal to that, you can small again foramen. This foramen below, if you see on the basal survey, from the outside, norma basalis, you find is a spinous process called spine of sphenoid. This portion is, this surface is formed by sphenoid, the greater wing of sphenoid. This is the lesser wing of sphenoid, right? And this surface is the greater wing sphenoid. And this surface actually is forming the roof of infratemporal fossa. Okay? So on this foramen is foramen spinosum, and below to this you find is spine of sphenoid, onto which there is sphenomandibular ligament attached, and sphenomandibular ligament attaches to the lingula of the mandible present at the mandibular foramen, and that develops from the first branchial arch. So this foramen spinosum provides passage for a nerve. Which nerve is that? That is nervus spinosus, right? Meningeal branch from the mandibular nerve. And an artery enters the cranium through this foramen is middle meningeal artery. So very important artery in case of, if you talk about the blood supply of meninges, the maximum portion of the dural blood supply is covered by middle meningeal artery. And that middle meningeal artery enters through foramen spinosum. You can see the impression not only on the cranial wall but also on the base of the skull. On inside you can find there is impression of this middle meningeal artery entering through foramen spinosum. And there's this anterior division which passes on the inner surface of pterion, right? The H-shaped suture. Then this edge, on the inside, and this artery is very prone to rupture, right? And if it ruptures, there will be epidural or extradural hematoma formed. Then you find, we'll talk about this petrous temporal bone. Remember one thing, if you remember, I taught you about petrous temporal bone. Any single point which is very important, I told you about petrous temporal bone, that it is the densest bone of the human body. It is the densest bone of the human body. Yes, not deepest, John. Yeah, it is densest. Densest, yes, Janvi. It is densest bone of the human body. Then, and the hardest substance in the body is enamel. Okay. Hardest substance is enamel. Yeah. You know them. Now, this petrous temporal bone, it actually is very important. It houses, the internal ear, and middle ear, as well as the bony portion of the external ear as well. So, the bony portion of external auditory meatus, then the middle ear cavity, then the internal ear, all is present within this petrous temporal bone. So it means the 3 ear ossicles will be present within this petrous temporal bone. Okay? And the cochlea and vestibule and the semicircular canals, they are also present within this petrous temporal bone. And apart from that, it also lodges the intrapetrous portion of internal carotid artery. I just told you that carotid artery enters the cranium through the carotid opening on the base of the skull, and that enters into the petrous temporal bone, from where, after having its intercoursing through this petrous temporal bone, it reaches the cranium, enters the cranium to foramen lacerum. Okay, so can you imagine how many important structures it is housing there? And if you remember, there was a tympanic plexus on the medial surface of the middle cranial cavity. Through that tympanic plexus was this nerve emerging out through the lesser petrosal, hiatus, lesser hiatus for lesser petrosal nerve. On this portion, this bone you're seeing is the tegment tympani. ठीक है? Tympanic plate कहते हैं, sorry. This is tympanic plate. So piercing through this lesser petrosal nerve descends down to enter the foramen ovale. Okay. There's that this because internal ear is here, right? So of course the eighth cranial nerve will also be in this. Like you have an external auditory meatus, remember, anterior to the mastoid process on the lateral sides of the skull. That's an opening called external auditory meatus. Somewhere here. You also have an internal auditory meatus on the posterior surface of the petrous temporal bone, and that internal auditory meatus is the point of exit of three nerves: facial nerve, vestibulocochlear nerve, and the sensory portion of facial nerve, the nervus intermedius. Three nerves along with the labyrinthine artery from the, it's a branch of basilar artery. So these structures enter into the petrous temporal bone through the internal acoustic meatus or internal auditory meatus. So these nerves are also within this. You have three nerves like facial nerve, nervus intermedius, and auditory nerve. Then because facial nerve has a course within this petrous temporal bone, in this you have the sensory ganglion of facial nerve, and that's called geniculate ganglion. So the first branch given out from the facial nerve in its intracranial course is greater petrosal nerve. Remember, coming from the superior salivatory nucleus, and this greater petrosal nerve will emerge from this tympanic plate, an opening here on the tympanic plate. That's the hiatus for the greater petrosal nerve. This greater petrosal nerve descends down in this foramen lacerum, and when it reaches the foramen lacerum from outside the skull, you know, there will be sympathetic plexuses around middle meningeal artery, and that's called deep petrosal nerve. So the two nerves, this greater petrosal nerve is carrying preganglionic secretomotor fibers for submandibular and pterygopalatine ganglion, right? So it will supply lacrimal gland, it will supply submandibular salivary gland, it will supply sublingual salivary glands, right? So this greater petrosal nerve, when it meets the deep petrosal nerve, together the two join, and then they enter a canal on the anterior surface of the foramen lacerum, and that canal opens anteriorly into the pterygopalatine fossa, and that canal on the anterior surface of the foramen lacerum is called pterygoid canal. So the two nerves, deep petrosal and greater petrosal nerve, when they join, that's called the nerve of pterygoid canal. And that nerve of pterygoid canal is also called Vidian nerve. Vidian nerve, when it enters the pterygoid palatine fossa, let me tell you, there's one foramen here. You know, this is actually a convex surface. The anterior end of the middle cranial fossa has a convexity because it lodges the temporal lobe of the brain. So there anteriorly you find is a foramen called foramen rotundum. And through this foramen rotundum, it is V2 division, the maxillary division, which emerges out of the skull. And there's a ganglion suspended from this nerve that's called pterygopalatine ganglion. So to that ganglion, the same nerve, Vedian nerve, passes through the pterygopalatine ganglion, and there these preganglionic fibers relay there. ठीक? Okay. So और अभी इसके अंदर और है, लेट मी टेल यू द अदर ब्रांचेस बता ही दे रहे हैं, क्योंकि पेट्रस टेम्पोरल की इंपॉर्टेंस चल रही, बीच बीच में याद आएगी भी तुम्हें, हम न्यूरल एनाटॉमी में फेशियल नर्व पढ़ाएंगे. The other branch given is the muscular branch, nerve to stapedius. Remember, the two muscles also inside this petrous temporal bone. One is tensor tympani. Remember, tensor tympani is attached to malleus. And tensor tympani develops from which arch? From the first pharyngeal arch. So the nerve supply will be yes. What will be the nerve supply of tensor tympani? You've been taught about this. It will be mandibular nerve. Shorium sani, correct. So it will be mandibular nerve. Then there's another muscle in this petrous temporal bone, and that is stapedius. Now this stapedius muscle is within this middle ear cavity. And this stapedius develops from which arch? Second arch. So the nerve supply for stapedius will be facial nerve. Okay. So that means this facial nerve I was talking, which enters into this petrous temporal bone through the internal acoustic meatus. Then facial nerve within this petrous temporal bone gives its three intracranial branches. One I told you is greater petrosal nerve. The other one will be nerve to stapedius. And the third one will be more important, remember, that is which nerve? Tensor tympani. No, tensor tympani is a muscle. That is chorda tympani. Yes, chorda tympani. It is chorda tympani. It is actually the pre-traumatic branch to the first branchial arch. Okay? And chorda tympani also carries special sensations from the anterior two-thirds of the tongue. Okay? So chorda tympani is also a branch from facial nerve, an intracranial branch. So you remember that there are three branches, the intracranial branches from the facial nerve, and all these three branches are from the intrapetrous course of the facial nerve. Greater petrosal, nerve to stapedius, and chorda tympani. After that, this facial nerve emerges out of the skull through stylomandibular foramen. And the outside, the course of the facial nerve, you have been taught about. It gives out its terminal branches. Remember, पीछे तुम ज़्यादा बात मत करो, right? Posteroauricular, temporal, zygomatic, buccal, marginal mandibular, and cervical. Apart from that, it also supplies two muscles there, posteroauricular, of course, it supplies the occipitalis muscles, but it also gives, branches before entering into the parotid gland. It will also supply posterior belly of digastric. Remember, it also supplies posterior belly of digastric. And stylohyoid, correct. Stylohyoid also develops from second arch. So these extracranial course mein, these branches, these muscles are supplied before this facial nerve enters the parotid gland. पोस्टेरोमीडियल सर्फेस ऑफ पैराइटल ग्लैंड में इंटर करती है फेशियल नर्व। तो मसल सप्लाई क्या हो जाएंगे, ऑक्सीपिटालिस, स्टाइलोहाई, then posterior digastric, and one of the muscles of facial expression which pulls the pin up behind, that is posterior auricular muscles also. Anyways, that was just to remind you, because focusing on topic, if you get some if you get deviated to some other topics, it actually helps to remind the things. So it's this way, because continuous studying of the same thing, it makes little boring. So when I'll be teaching about facial nerve, don't forget, I'll be asking you these things again. Now you're seeing is the posterior cranial fossa. The posterior cranial fossa is actually infratentorial fossa. Remember, this parts of the brain, let's talk about this portion. Anterior cranial fossa lodges the frontal lobes of the brain, and the middle cranial fossa lodges the temporal lobe of the brain. Now posterior cranial fossa lodges, who will tell me? It lodges cerebellum. It lodges cerebellum. So this portion is covered by a tent of dura mater, and that is called tentorium cerebelli, a horizontal tent, right, which is attached here to this transverse sinus posteriorly and to the superior border of the petrous temporal bone, although it reaches up to the anterior clinoid process. So, and it has a notch here for the brain stem to pass. So this portion is covered by tentorium. So it is actually dividing into a supratentorial and an infratentorial compartment. Infratentorial compartment is actually called the posterior cranial fossa. And what is which portion of the brain occupies supratentorial compartment? It is the occipital lobe of the brain. Then in the posterior cranial fossa, you are seeing this is the largest foramen of the skull, that is foramen magnum, and you have this prominence here on the posteriorly. This is internal occipital protuberance, is actually the confluence of sinuses, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 sinuses meet here, right? I'll tell you what are the sinuses. So this point is the confluence of sinuses, right? So you have right and left transverse sinuses given out. This one here, it is the internal occipital crest, a bony margin onto which there will be a dual venous sinus called occipital sinus. Above it will be superior sagittal sinus, and because it's tentorium cerebelli onto the superior surface of tentorium cerebelli in the median plane, it is the straight sinus. Then this transverse sinus, when they move out laterally in the posterior cranial fossa, they dip down in a sigmoid course, and you can see this is the sigmoid course. This sigmoid, the transverse sinus runs transversely, and then it reaches the posterior end of this superior petrosal surface. It dips down in a sigmoid course, and this is called sigmoid sinus. And this sigmoid sinus opens through this foramen. Again, this is a false foramen, and this is jugular foramen. So it emerges out of this sigmoid sinus continues to emerge out of this jugular foramen. Yes, Akash, it continues in the form of internal jugular vein. The straight sinus or sigmoid sinus continues as internal jugular vein outside this foramen. That's the jugular foramen. Okay. So occipital bone has this squamous portion. This portion is flattened portion. This is squamous portion, right? The cerebellar hemispheres are lodged here, but it has a body here. this called body of occipital bone, and which joins the body of sphenoid to form basi-occiput or basi-sphenoid, you can say. And this sloping surface is called clivus. And here also you have a plexus, it's called venous plexus, the basilar plexus here. And this is the foramen. It's a true foramen because it's within a single bone. It's foramen magnum. And on outside, you know, to this foramen, anterolaterally to the margins here and here, you find the two condyles of occipital bone, right? Then you have the openings here. You have anterior condyle canal and a posterior condyle canal. Thick. That will be taught later on with the cranial nerves, which cranial nerve passes through the anterior condylar canal, and what are the vessels passing through the condylar canals, anterior and posterior condylar canals. So anyways, going through, I mean, you know, let me tell you that this bone, you're talking about, right, 8 bones which forms the calvaria. One unpaired bone is this ethmoid also. You see that this is the frontal bone forming the roof of the orbits, and this surface is actually forming the roof of the nose. So this surface is formed by the roof of the nose, and the bone that forms the roof of the nose is ethmoid, right? So ethmoid has a perpendicular elevated crest of bone, and that is called crista galli. Gallus domesticus, you know, um, it's a like, you know, murga जैसे कहते हैं, जंगली मुर्गा. You know, they have this, you know, जो ये जो होते हैं जंगली मुर्गा, इनके सर पे there is this comb कहते हैं, right, the red color thing, something like that. Gallus कहते हैं शायद, Osama, maybe you saying it's Gallus. So यहाँ पे ये जो होता है, this is because Gallus domesticus से नाम पड़ा है उसकी वजह से, that it is an elevated crest called crista galli. And on to the adjacent side of the crista galli, you find is a sieve-like plate of bone which have, you know, perforations for the olfactory nerves, and this is called cribriform palate. Thick. So this cribriform palate and crista galli, because of its opening here into the cranial cavity, it is a part of calvaria. There will be anterior and posterior ethmoidal nerves and vessels entering the cranial cavity through this cribriform palate. And let me tell you that anterior ethmoidal artery and nerve, they will pass down again, dipping down from this cribriform palate down into the nose. So they enter from orbit into the cranium and then they reach to the nose, right? Okay. So you've seen this, the maximum what I could cover here in this slide. Otherwise, the better way of teaching is with the bone in your hand. It's demonstration or tutorial classes is the better way to teach the bones. Now, you're seeing the separated portion here. This is this anterior cranial fossa. The floor of the anterior cranial fossa, as I was telling, this is frontal bone. Onto this surface, it is this frontal lobe of the brain that is kept here. This much portion is made by ethmoid bone, which has crista galli, right? And on the two sides, you have this cribriform palate, so it is ethmoid. Now, this portion is made by sphenoid bone. Sphenoid has this body here. Then you have this anterior clinoid process, and just medial यहाँ पे अंदर की तरफ downwards medially you have a medial clinoid process as well, and this is the lesser wing of sphenoid. Okay, so this was about the floor of the anterior cranial fossa. Now you're seeing is the floor of middle cranial fossa. In the middle cranial fossa, the bones are sphenoid, right? This is the body of sphenoid, which has this hypophyseal fossa, and tuberculum cellae is the anterior margin. Then you have sulcus chiasmaticus, which lodges the optic chiasma. Then on the two sides, you have groove for internal carotid, and this surface lodges the cavernous sinus on the two sides. Then this is the greater wing of sphenoid. Greater wing of sphenoid mein, these are foramen spinosum, foramen ovale, and foramen rotundum. Foramen rotundum, which opens anteriorly into the pterygopalatine fossa. Then you are seeing the rest of the bone here. You can see here, it is the temporal bone. In this temporal bone, you are seeing this portion here is tegmen tympani. This tegmen tympani forms the upper surface of the petrous temporal bone. Right? Tegmen tympani. So this anterior sloping surface as well as posterior surface here, this roof of this petrous temporal, roof of the middle cranial cavity, roof of the internal ear, rather, it is all formed by tegmen tympani, and this much is the squamous portion of the temporal bone, blue color. Then where you find that this apex of petrous temporal meets this sphenoid, this apex of petrous temporal meets the sphenoid, and this portion they haven't shown here is occipital bone, right? So the point where occipital meets this sphenoidal meets the petrous, the three bones, when they meet together, there is a gap created, and that's called foramen lacerum. So it is not a true foramen, right? Foramen lacerum, you can see this margin of occipital bone and sphenoid and the tegmen tympani, which is part of petrous temporal bone. So this opening is foramen lacerum. Okay. Now you see this is the posterior cranial fossa, the floor of posterior cranial fossa. This is the squamous portion of the occipital bone. You can see the flattened portion. This lodges the cerebellar hemispheres. This point is internal occipital protuberance, where I told you it's like confluence of sinuses. 5 sinuses meet here. Remember that superior sagittal sinus, and to the margins of these transverse sinus, I told you it is the attached surface of tentorium cerebelli. So superior sagittal sinus, when it reaches to this confluence of sinuses, remember I told you that superior sagittal sinus continues as the right transverse sinus. Can you see here? Yes. So the superior sagittal sinus continues as the right transverse sinus. Similarly, the sinus included in the falx cerebelli, that is occipital sinus, that will continue here with the left transverse sinus. And over to the internal occipital crespi, there is there is occipital sinus that will continue with the left transverse sinus. Anyways, so here you will find that this falx cerebelli splits on the posterior margin of the foramen magnum. It will move to the two sides, lodging the occipital sinus. Then you find this oval-shaped cavity, the foramen magnum. On anterolateral side, you find these openings. This is hypoglossal canal or anterior condylar canal. It's a passage for exit of 12th cranial nerve, right? Hypoglossal nerve emerges out through this. And this foramen, now you'll see, is again a false foramen. It is formed between tegmen tympani. The the tegmental portion of this petrous temporal, between petrous temporal and occipital bone, this gap here is called jugular foramen. This is called jugular foramen. It's a very important foramen. Okay. 9, 10th, 11 cranial nerves pass. Sigmoid sinus, can you see transverse sinus? This sigmoid sinus, it's a sigmoid sinus, and it also emerges here as jugular vein. There are meningeal branches entering here, meningeal branches from occipital artery, meningeal branches from ascending pharyngeal artery, they are entering here. So this is a very important foramen, jugular foramen. And here you find this foramen. Can you see this foramen? Like, you can see this foramen, and this in this, you know, what you call it as a sigmoid sinus, you find this foramen, right? So this is mastoid foramen. This is mastoid foramen. And this portion here, the purple color bone, can you see this? This bone is parietal bone. The posterior inferior angle of the parietal bone is this, right? So if you talk about transverse sinus, actually transverse sinus crosses this occipital portion of the sigmoid portion of the occipital bone, then it crosses through the posterior inferior angle of the parietal bone, and then it reaches the petrous bone on the posterior surface, and then it courses in a sigmoid way, sigmoid sinus that runs over the petrous as well as occipital bone to reach the jugular foramen. Okay, and here you see on the posterior surface of the petrous temporal bone, as I told you, is an opening which is like, you know, a canal that's called internal acoustic meatus, and through this, I told you, facial nerve, vestibulocochlear nerve, nervous intermediates, labyrinthine artery, they enter into the uh, cavity of the petrous temporal bone. Okay. Then after removing the cranial vault, when you remove the cranial vault, you know, you will find its outer endosteal layer of dura mater, right? So that means the outer layer, you know, dura mater, which lines the cranium from inside, is made up of two layers. The dura has these two layers. The outer layer is endosteal layer, which forms the inner periosteum of the inner table, and the another layer is the meningeal layer. By the way, these two layers are fused, right? They're not separable. Only at places where they separate, they form gaps between the two layers of the dura, and that forms the dural venous sinuses. So this you seeing is the outer endosteal layer. Let me tell you that among these two layers, outer and inner layer of the two dura mater, outer layer is more vascular and inner layer is more fibrous. Okay. So outer layer being more vascular, right? Because you will find the cerebral meningeal vessels running over to the outer layer of the dura. That means they are running below the inner table of the cranial vault, and that's why these vessels, you can see these vessels, branches of the middle meningeal artery, they will form impressions on the undersurface of the cranial vault because they are closely applied to the inner table of the cranial vault. So the space where these vessels on the dura mater, which these vessels are running, is called epidural space. Okay. Below to this, if you remove this, between, the two, after the two layers of the dura mater, you will find the second layer is called arachnoid matter. The second meninges is from outside to inside is arachnoid matter. So between dura and arachnoid, it is subdural space. Now this subdural space, because the the cerebral vessels, they run in the subarachnoid space. So the cerebral vessels, they have communications with the veins of the skull, and even these dural venous sinuses, they have communications, rather, these dural venous sinuses, exactly, they have communications to the vein of the skull through emissary veins. So subdural space will be traversed by cerebral veins while draining into the dural venous sinuses. Remember this point, I'll tell you, it has a clinical significance. And dura mater is thick, fibrous, and that's why it's called pachymenings. Pachymenings because it's thick. The rest two, yani arachnoid and pyometer together, they're called leptomeninges. And this dura mater from within the cranium, it extends out also into the vertebral canal. But one thing important, that endosteal layer of the dura, that does not continue in the vertebral canal. It's only the meningeal layer of the dura that exits out of the foramen magnum into the vertebral canal, and that reaches up to the lower border of S2 vertebrae, remember. Now about the folds of dura mater. There are like 4 important folds of dura mater. Okay. One important fold you can see is a sickle shaped. The largest fold here in the median plane is falx cerebri. Now falx cerebri is a sickle shaped vertical fold in the median plane, right? So it will have two ends, right? The anterior end is narrow, right? And the anterior end is attached to the crista galli. That's a plate emerging, vertical uh, plate arising from the ethmoid. So in the anterior clinical fossa, it is attached to crista galli. The posterior end is broader and it attaches in the median plane on the upper surface of tentorium. This is tentorium cerebelli. So it is attached to the upper surface of tentorium cerebelli in the median plane. These are the two ends. Then falx cerebri has two margins, an upper or a fixed margin. Superior border is fixed and the inferior border is free. Right? It doesn't have any attachments, right? It's free. So the superior border you can see is attached on the adjacent sides of the sagittal suture or sagittal sinus. Like sinus is like a concavity or depression on the undersurface of the sagittal suture. So the superior margin of this falx cerebri is attached to the margins of the sagittal suture. The lower margin is free, and below to this free margin will be corpus callosum, right? Which binds the two. It's a commissural band of fibers binding the two cerebral hemispheres. So the lower margin reaches up down deep between, it's a vertical band. So it is dipping down in the median longitudinal fissure separating the two cerebral hemispheres. And of course, this falx cerebri will have two surfaces, right and left, which will be, separating the two cerebral hemispheres, and both will be facing the medial surfaces of the adjoining cerebral hemispheres. Then it encloses three sinuses and its upper border and upper fixed border. It encloses superior sagittal sinus, and its lower margin, the free margin, also encloses a sinus called inferior sagittal sinus. And the point, and on the line where it attaches to the tentorium cerebelli, there also it encloses a sinus called straight sinus. This straight sinus is actually in continuation with the great cerebral vein. Thick. Then, yes, great cerebral vein of Galen. Thick. Then we'll talk about this tentorium cerebelli. It's a horizontal fold of dura, right, which separates the posterior portion of the cranial cavity into supratentorial and infratentorial compartment. The infratentorial compartment is called the posterior cranial fossa. So now, this tentorium cerebelli has two surfaces, a superior surface and an inferior surface. Superior surface will be in relation to the occipital lobes of the brain, and the inferior surface will be covering the two cerebellar hemispheres. And it is not horizontal exactly. It's not horizontal, it's rather tilted. It is a 10 shaped thing. It is elevated in the median plane, right, where it is attached to the falx cerebri. It is elevated here, and both the sides it's tilting downwards, and its anterior free margin is elevated. The posterior lateral margins are little down, so it has an elevation. It rather actually fits the convexity of the cerebellar hemispheres below, right? So because that's because it has a slight 10 shaped surface. Then about its two margins, the posterior margin is fixed, right? The posterolateral margin is fixed to the transverse sulcus on the inner surface of occipital bone. Then anterolateral surface is fixed to the superior petrosal border, superior border of the petrous temporal bone. This anterolateral fixed border will lodge the superior petrosal sinus. This posterior lateral margin, fixed margin, will enclose the transverse sinus. Then this fixed margin continues here to reach the anterior crinoid process. Remember, the fixed margin is not attached here, rather it continues till the anterior clinoid process. So the attachment of tentorium cerebelli is along the transverse sulcus, then superior petrosal border, reaching up to the anterior clinoid process. Then it has an anterior and a fixed, anterior and a free border, and that border is called tentorial notch. So what exactly is the content of infratentorial fossa or the posterior cranial fossa? The contents of the posterior cranial fossa is cerebellum, pons, medulla, and together they are called hindbrain, right? So the content of posterior cranial fossa or infratentorial compartment is hindbrain plus the lower portion of midbrain. So that means what portion of the brain will be crossing through this tentorial notch? This surface of the bone is called clivus, right? It's a sloping surface dipping downwards posteriorly towards the foramen magnum. Onto this surface, it's the brain stem which is resting. So what crosses this tentorial notch will be the upper portion of the midbrain, as well as the anterior surface of the upper vermis of the cerebellum. Okay? Anterior portion of the upper vermis and the upper half of the midbrain are at this level of tentorial notch, right? And these two nerves, can you see? These nerves are actually arising from the midbrain. Eighth, third and fourth cranial nerves. They're rising from the midbrain, and you can say they are entering into the cavernous sinus, piercing its roof. Okay. This is, the posterior clinoid process. Okay. So you can see that the anterior, this free margin and the attached margin, they cross each other. The free margin you can see is attached to the posterior clinoid process, but this fixed margin reaches to the anterior clinoid process. There's a crossing happening at this point. So because of this crossing of the two margins of the tentorium cerebelli, there is actually a triangular area in front and vexillary, because this is diaphragma cilia as well as the lateral surfaces are the roof of the cavernous sinus. So this triangular area is actually the roof of the cavernous sinus anterior to the posterior clinoid processes anterolaterally, and this will be pierced by third and fourth cranial nerves. Okay, then we'll talk about this another fold of dura mater. This is called falx cerebelli. Now, falx cerebelli is also crescentric in shape. It's crescentric in shape, just like this, but it is a smaller crescent, right? And it has, two margins, or rather two ends. First, we'll talk about the two margins. The posterior margin is a fixed margin, and it is attached to the internal occipital crest, and this posterior fixed margin lodges the occipital sinus within it. Anterior margin is free, right? Anterior margin is free, and it projects between the two cerebellar hemispheres, and that is like, posterior cerebellar notch. So the anterior free margin of falx cerebelli projects into the posterior cerebellar notch, right? Then the two surfaces of this falx cerebelli will be in addition in relation to the two medial surfaces of the two cerebellar hemispheres. Now the upper end of this falx cerebelli is attached to the inferior surface of the tentorium cerebelli in the median plane, but not along its entire length. That's a difference. Falx cerebri will be attached to the entire length in the median plane over the upper surface of tentorium cerebelli, but not falx cerebelli. Of course, it will be attached in the median plane onto the undersurface of the tentorium cerebelli, but not along the entire length. Then the lower end of this, when it reaches down along the occipital crest, then when it reaches the foramen magnum, this falx cerebelli actually splits. It splits and runs along the margins of foramen magnum, and you can say it vanishes there. It disappears there, because this occipital sinus, when it reaches the posterior margin of foramen magnum, it splits on the two sides, and there this diminishes the two sinuses, right? After being drained out through this, it merges to the sigmoid sinuses. That's how, this falx cerebelli is. Then this one is tentorium. This one is diaphragma cilia. Diaphragma cilia, this is the body of sphenoid. Body of sphenoid. This lodges. This has a fossa, depression, sella tertica कहते हैं या hypophyseal fossa कहते हैं. So this diaphragma fillet is a fold of dura which roofs this hypophyseal fossa. It actually is circular in shape. This diaphragm is actually circular in shape, with its anterior margin is attached here to this tuberculum cilia. This margin is tuberculum cilia, and posterior surface is attached to the dorsum cilia. This portion is dorsum cilia. The lateral extent of diaphragma cilia is extending beyond this body of sphenoid, both the sides, and then dipping down to enclose cavernous sinus on the two sides, and then down below it merges with the endosteal layer of the dura mater. So this roof of hypophyseal fossa is formed by diaphragma sellae, and on the two sides you have it also forms the lateral wall of this cavernous sinus, both the sides. Here you can see is the stalk of pituitary, which has this, diaphragma sellae has a median aperture through which pituitary reaches into this fossa. And one thing that arachnoid matter is not seen within this hypophyseal fossa. Okay, and there you find is internal carotid artery, which after coursing or running through this cavernous sinus emerges through the roof of this cavernous sinus to become cerebral portion, because internal carotid artery, that has been taught to you, I think, in intracranial portion it has a petrous part, then it has a cavernous part, and then it has the cranial part. So after emerging out of this diaphragm, cavernous sinus, now it will run its cerebral portion. Okay, this is another view. The margins. This is anterior margin of the diaphragma sellae. This is tuberculum sellae. This posterior margin is dorsum sellae, and laterally both the side it is cavernous sinus, and this is uh, you know these are the anterior clinoid processes. This is the posterior clinoid processes, and this is the free notch of the tentorium cerebelli, and the free margin reaches here anteriorly. Actually, this is the free margin. You can say कि U shaped ना ये जो ये U shaped है, इसके दोनों ends they reach here to the anterior clinoid process. ठीक, and you can see this is the straight sinus here, formed at the base of the falx cerebri, straight sinus. This is the transverse sinus. This one is the superior petrosal sinus to the anterolateral attached margin of tentorium cerebelli. The two sinuses enclosed, these are superior sagittal, and along the free margin is the inferior sagittal sinus. And tentorium cerebelli separates the occipital lobe from the hindbrain, you know that. And hindbrain is actually the occipital lobes. Sorry, hindbrain. Hindbrain is actually cerebellum, medulla, and pons. So, which are the part of the posterior cranial fossa, and it also lodges the lower portion of the midbrain. यानी कि midbrain lower portion plus the hindbrain is the cavity is within this infratentorial portion. Then anterior end of the falx, you can see here it is attached to crista galli, as well as there is a frontal crest here, because you don't have a sagittal suture here in the frontal bone. Sagittal suture is only present between the two parietal bones. So it said that it is attached to the two margins of the sagittal suture or sagittal sulcus. Then it is attached to the frontal crest, and then crista galli. Okay, so the names you've now this you're seeing is tentorium cerebelli. This is the straight sinus, and this is great cerebral vein of Galen, which continues as straight sinus. This is superior sagittal sinus, which continues as the right transverse sinus, right? So you have, and this is the superior petrosal sinus. They have the attached margins, right? This is the attached margin of tentorium cerebelli on the superior margin, the pectus temporal bone, and this is the free margin of the tentorium cerebelli, which the U-shaped, and it reaches straight to the anterior clinoid process. And this is the attached margin, which reaches to the dorsum sellae or the posterior clinoid process. So So the free margin and attached margin, they cross here, right? So when they cross, they leave a triangular space here at the apex of petrous temporal bone. This triangular space is actually the roof of the cavernous sinus posteriorly, and which allows for the passage of two cranial nerves, third and fourth cranial nerve. Okay. Now here you'll see that this is how actually the cranial cavity, which is so big when you expose, when you cut open the skull, but it has been compartmentalized because of the different folds of dura mater. You can see this is falx cerebri, this is tentorium cerebelli, and down below to this the space below this is the free margin of the tentorial notch. So the space here down below is posterior cranial fossa, and down is this opening foramen magnum. This portion you can see is falx cerebelli in the infratentorial compartment. There you find is diaphragma cellae with an aperture through which infundibulum passes and which suspends the pituitary within the hypophyseal fossa. Now, as I was telling that continuation of dura in the vertebral canal, dura within the cranium has two layers, right? It has endosteal layer or the periosteal layer of the dura mater and a meningeal layer of the dura mater. So when the two layers of the dura they reach towards the foramen magnum, remember that this endosteal layer merges with the periosteum of the bone, right? And it's only the meningeal layer of the dura which continues in the spinal cord, continues in the vertebral canal in the form of spinal dura mater. So spinal dura mater is continuation of cranial dura mater. Clear? In the vertebral column, you don't have two layers of dura mater, only the meningeal layer. Now, this is structures in the cranial vault. When you take a sagittal, coronal section, actually, this is a coronal section, which you can see is a sagittal suture here. This is a flattened bone, flat bone of the cranial vault with an outer table and an inner table. This is the marrow. So you have this outer meningeal layer, the endosteal layer. Then you have inner meningeal layer. The inner meningeal layer, remember, is more fibrous. It is more thick. And when the two meningeal layers overlap each other, they form a fold, and that's called falx cerebri. And the gap between the endosteal and meningeal layer is called dural venous sinus. So underneath to this, you find is this space. Remember, this space between the bone and the endosteal layer. This space is epidural space. And then you have the another layer of Mennings that's called arachnoid matter, the green one. Now, arachnoid matter is a very, delicate. It's not a thick layer, not much fibrous, and it's the it is translucent rather, right? So arachnoid matter, it had lots of trabeculations, and because of these trabeculations, it makes this a little spongy layer, and it has below to this arachnoid, and this the red color one which covers this cerebral cortex, and you can see it dips into the various sulci. The red color one is pia mater. So this space, the green one, is subarachnoid space between arachnoid matter. This is arachnoid matter, and arachnoid and pia. This is subarachnoid space filled with trabeculations, making it spongy, and this is the neurovascular plane. This is the vascular plane. Cerebral vessels will be running in this subarachnoid space over to this, pia mater. That's why pia mater has two layers: pia gland, epipia, pia gland. The vessels will be tethered, and this epipia, जो है, that uh, that forms perivascular sheets as the vessels enter into the cerebral cortex. You can see these small little branches of the cerebral vessels entering into the cerebral, you can say, is cerebral cortex and the white matter. But remember that the cerebral cortex is much more vascular because it has a collateral supply as well. But the white matter is less vascular and it is only supplied by end arteries, right? You don't have collaterals for the blood vessels supplying the white matter. So that's why I told you that injury to the central branches is leads to irreversible injuries. So now about subarachnoids, subdural space. Subdural space is between arachnoid and the meningeal layer of the dura, and this is a potential space, right? In cases of trauma, this might also open up. Now look here, what are the structures which perforate these? Look here, because you know that this subarachnoid space is a passage for the cerebral vessels, right? Cerebral arteries, cerebral veins, they run onto the surface of the cerebral cortex in the subarachnoid space. This arachnoid, arachnoid matter, it sends its villus processes or pedunculated tufts perforating the subarachnoid, passing through the subarachnoid space, then perforating the meningeal layer of the dura mater, and then reaching into the dural venous sinus, where they form this pedunculated tufts called arachnoid granulations. Sometimes these granulations are so big that they form impressions on the undersurface of the cranial vault. I had shown you in the very beginning, right? Because of that, you might even find impressions on the bone because of the arachnoid. And these are the drainage apparatus of CSF. Then another thing is you find these cerebral veins running here. They also drain ultimately, the venous drainage of within the cranium is either through the dural venous sinuses or through the emissary veins. And the dural venous sinuses terminate in the form of internal jugular veins. So these cerebral veins, you can see they are perforating the meningeal layer and draining into the dural venous sinuses. So if it is asked, like, the subarachnoid, subdural space, right? Subdural space, you can see, is being perforated by the cerebral veins as well as by arachnoid villi and granulations. Now think about when I asked you sometime that the dangerous layer of the scalp is, and the answer was the fourth layer. Why the fourth layer? Because fourth layer is of the scalp is loose areolar connective tissue, and similar was this condition there in the scalp also. They have not drawn the scalp here above to this. There will be, the 5-layer SCALP. L will be the loose areolar connective tissue. But the subcutaneous nerves and vessels, everywhere they run in the second layer. And the second layer is superficial fascia below the skin. So the nerves and vessels will be of the scalp. They run in the second layer. So emissary veins, they are not shown. The emissary veins will, perforate these and will drain into the veins of the scalp. So because of the loose cerebral, when where there's trauma, the scalp slips, or there will be any sort of laceration or this tearing of the layers of the scalp. What happens, if not even tearing, this abrasion on the surface of the scalp might lead to rupture of these emissary veins passing through the fourth layer, right? So that's why that's a dangerous layer. What I'm emphasizing here is because of any such trauma, this in this subdural space, these vessels and these granulations might rupture. So there will be a blood collected in the subdural space, and that's called subdural hematoma, right? The subdural hematoma will be collection of blood from the cerebral veins. Important point. In case of epidural hematoma, if blood vessels, what was the content in epidural space? I had told you these will be the meningeal vessels, meningeal artery, meningeal veins. They are running in the epidural space. So trauma hua, fracture hua, so there will be blood here. Now the blood here will be arterial. Remember, you know, epidural hematoma and subdural hematoma. The difference is that in the epidural hematoma the blood collected will be arterial blood, because middle meningeal artery चल रही है इसमें, right? तो उसके laceration से perforation के chances जल्दी हो जाते हैं. So the blood collected in epidural space will be arterial, and the blood collected in the subdural hematoma will be venous, and that will be because of the meningeal artery, and here will be because of the cerebral veins. Okay. Now you see, these are the emissary veins. Emissary veins are valveless veins, and they continue, they pierce both the inner and outer table of the cranial vault to connect with the veins of the scalp. Okay. Then let me tell you one more thing, that because dura is a packing meninges, it's a fibrous thing, and that I told you they have two layers, endosteal layer and meningeal layer. The important thing I told you, that the endosteal layer is more vascular. Remember why more vascular? Because you have meningeal vessels running on outside, right? So it is more vascular, and the meningeal layer is more fibrous, right? But if you talk about the nerve supply, both are having enough nerve supply, so they are pain sensitive. Now you can, one important thing is, because abhi tak they were like fibrous thing, but when they split, when the endosteal and meningeal layers is split to enclose a dural venous sinuses, remember that the inner lining of the dural venous sinus is lined by endothelium. ऐसा नहीं है कि यहाँ पे ब्लड भी है एंड इट इज ऑल फाइब्रस आउटसाइड, ऐसा नहीं है. It is lined by endothelium. So in short, now you see is a continuation of endothelium, right? The dural venous sinuses actually, they, because it's the lining is same as veins, like cerebral vein. This also is made up of endothelium on inside. Then it reaches the dural venous sinus, which also has endothelium on inside. And here it is emissary vein, which is communicating with the veins of the scalp. This also has endothelium on inside. Then diploic veins क्या करते हैं? Remember, emissary veins का purpose क्या था? That they are actually valveless, like तो valveless होने से क्या है कि it maintains the intracranial pressure, like in case it can be unilateral direction नहीं होता इसमें, right? The blood can flow on either ways, inside to outside or outside to inside in the emissary veins, like, so you don't have a fixed direction of flow of blood in emissary veins. Diploic के बारे में difference ये है कि the diploic, it is the flat bones are rich site of hemolymphopoiesis. You everybody know this, right? This is a rich site of hemopoiesis. So diploic are actually loading the newly formed blood cells from the marrow into the dural venous sinuses. So most of the diploic, they perforate the inner table, although there are few diploic in the frontal region that they drain outside in the veins of the scalp as well. But most of the diploic veins, they perforate the inner table. So there's a difference. Emissary veins perforate both the tables, and the diploic veins perforate only the inner table. Sometimes only the outer. Okay, so you can see that this dural venous sinus actually is just like veins. The only thing, they are fixed veins, right? They are fixed veins, they are valveless, they line by endothelium. Okay, and because they're dilated portions, so there is sluggish flow of blood, and it also is a drainage site for CSF. Now in the posterior cranial fossa, when you take coronal sections, this is the posterior cranial fossa, when you take coronal sections, right? The first section is through the tentorial notch. There you find is this is diaphragma cellae. Tentorium cerebelli. This is tentorium cerebelli, which is tent shaped. You have a notch here. So you have right and left transverse sinuses at the posterolateral attachment of the tentorium cerebelli. This is superior sagittal sinus. This is lined by endothelium. And remember this, of course, difference from vein and dural venous sinuses is you don't have any muscles. Okay, you don't have any muscles in this dural venous sinuses. Then I had told you that outer is more vascular, outer layer of the dura, inner layer is more fibrous. Then you have this falx cerebri, the lower free margin has inferior sagittal sinus suspended. Then you take a coronal section to the middle portion of the fossa. When you take a portion to the middle portion, then you'll find that this is tentorium cerebelli, onto which this falx cerebri is attached, and where it attaches to the tentorium cerebelli, it lodges the straight sinus, right? Okay. Then when you take and this is falx cerebelli, right? Falx cerebelli lodges the occipital sinus. Then when you take a section, to the posterior most portion of the posterior cranial fossa, there you'll find this type of feature, where you'll find is actually the internal occipital protuberance, right? The confluence of sinuses. So you find that falx cerebelli, this is superior sagittal sinus. There it meets the tentorium cerebri, the straight sinus. There you find the two transverse sinuses, and this is occipital sinus in the falx cerebelli. Right? Now this is the petrous. This is a sagittal section through the petrous temporal, rather through the apex of petrous temporal bone, where you find this. There are two layers of dura. This is the endosteal layer of the dura covering the petrous temporal bone, and this is the meningeal layer of the dura, right? And on this in this posterior cranial fossa, there was this medulla pons and midbrain resting over the clivus, and this fifth cranial nerve emerges out from the pons, right? So when this fifth nerve emerges out of the pons, that is trigeminal nerve, it pushes the inner layer of the dura mater anterior to the superior or upper margin of the petrous temporal bone. So when it pulls the dura along with its, this is the sensory root, which has this ganglion, trigeminal ganglion, also called Gasserian ganglion. So it's a sensory ganglion. So this ganglion is concentric. It's big enough. You can see with naked eyes. It's a big ganglion. It pushes this dura mater, or you can say it evaginates in evagination of the inferior layer. This is the inner layer. You have outer layer and inner layer, and at the apex of this petrous temporal bone, which you find is attachment of the anterolateral portion of the tentorium cerebelli, which lodges the superior petrosal sinus, right? So in between the superior petrosal sinus and the upper margin of the petrous temporal bone, it is trigeminal ganglion, which pushes or evaginates the inferior layer of the tentorium cerebelli. So with that, there is a recess formed at the apex of petrous temporal bone. This recess actually pulls the dura along with the covering this Gasserian ganglion. So this recess of dura mater covering the trigeminal ganglion over this trigeminal impression, right? So the apex of temporal bone on its anterior surface has a depression, and that is called trigeminal sulcus or trigeminal impression. So that trigeminal ganglion rests on the anterior surface of the apex of petrous temporal bone, covered by a recess of dura mater, and that recess is called Meckel's cave. Okay, I think I should not continue much because the time is enough. Time, it's the class was still 12, right? So it's already over time. So I'll end up here, wind up here. Next time, if I get chance, I'll continue with this. Okay. So I'm ending up, and you people give your attendance